Zbigniew Brzezinski, M.A. in Political Science, McGill University, 1950. Ph.D. in Political Science, Harvard, 1953. Research Fellow of Harvard's Russian Research Center and Harvard's Center for International Affairs, 1953 to 1960. Director of the Research Institute on Communist Affairs, Columbia University, 1962 to 1977. Foreign Affairs Advisor to President Lyndon Baines Johnson, 1966 to 1968. Author of Between Two Ages, America's Role in the Technotronic Era, 1970. Co-founded the Trilateral Commission, with David Rockefeller in 1973. Member of the Council on Foreign Relations, and the Bilderberg Group. National Security Advisor to President Jimmy Carter, 1977 to 1981. His tenure involved renegotiating the Panama Canal Treaty, 1978, negotiating the Camp David Accords, 1978. The overthrow of the Shah of Iran, 1979, the arming of the Mujahideen, in response to the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, and signing the joint communiqué on the establishment of diplomatic relations with China, 1979. Served as President Bill Clinton's emissary to Azerbaijan, 1995. Author of The Grand Chessboard, American Primacy and Its Geostrategic Imperatives, 1997.
Former National Security Advisor for President Carter, Dr. Zbigniew Brzezinski, not you.
He's good.
Yesterday, we spoke with my dad and began by asking him about the potential threats and opportunities in Donald Trump's outreach to Russia.
In the technotronic society, the trend would seem to be towards the aggregation of the individual support of millions of uncoordinated citizens, easily within the reach of magnetic and attractive personalities, effectively exploiting the latest communications techniques to manipulate emotions and control reason.
Another example is the array of technologies, often referred to collectively as geoengineering, that potentially could help reverse the warming effects of global climate change. One that has gained my personal attention is stratospheric aerosol injection, or SAI, a method of seeding the stratosphere with particles that can help reflect the sun's heat in much the same way that volcanic eruptions do. As promising as it may be, moving forward on SAI would also raise a number of challenges for our government and for the international community. On the geopolitical side, the technology's potential to alter weather patterns and benefit certain regions of the world at the expense of other regions could trigger sharp opposition by some nations. Others might seize on SAI's benefits and back away from their commitment to carbon dioxide reductions. And as with other breakthrough technologies, global norms and standards are lacking to guide the deployment and implementation of SAI and other geoengineering initiatives.
Technology will make available to the leaders of major nations techniques for conducting secret warfare, of which only a bare minimum of the security forces need be appraised. Techniques of weather modification could be employed to produce prolonged periods of drought or storm. The technotronic era involves the gradual appearance of a more controlled society. Such a society would be dominated by an elite, unrestrained by traditional values. Soon it will be possible to assert almost continuous surveillance over every citizen, and maintain up-to-date complete files, containing even the most personal information about the citizen. These files will be subject to instantaneous retrieval by the authorities. I foresee a time when we shall have the means, and therefore, inevitably, the temptation to manipulate the behavior and intellectual functioning of all the people, through environmental and biochemical manipulation of the brain. Persisting social crisis, the emergence of a charismatic personality, and the exploitation of mass media to obtain public confidence, would be the stepping stones in the piecemeal transformation of the United States into a highly controlled society. The society will be dominated by an elite of persons free from traditional values, who will have no doubt in fulfilling their objectives, by means of purge techniques, with which they will influence the behavior of people, and will control and watch the society in all details. It will become possible to exert a practically permanent watch on each citizen of the world.
Zbigniew Brzezinski, Between Two Ages, America's Role in the Technotronic Era, 1970.
Brzezinski is one of the most important technocrats of the 20th century and thinkers of our age. In fact, he's in a way a successor to Dr. Carroll Quigley. Now, Brzezinski went to McGill University as someone fleeing from the Soviets out of Poland, and at McGill he was noticed for, I think, studying technocracy. And you can find this very easily in his first book in 1970, Between Two Ages, where he talks about weather modification. He talks about ELF towers and the ability to influence people through large-scale electromagnetic weaponry. He talks about the ability to create a completely government-controlled apparatus which would direct you from womb to tomb, basically. He called it lifelong education even back in 1970. So Brzezinski is formative in many ways. He talked about how the internet would be this catalyzing force to mow down ideologies, how technology would kind of become a new religion in the next several decades. And he says basically that there's the death of three things: the death of God, the death of religion, the death of nationalism, and the death of culture. And this is achieved primarily through consumerism. So here you have a key technocrat who would be a deep state advisor to numerous administrations after him: Carter, Reagan. He would even be prominent in the Obama administration, and that's because he's the father of the NGO smart, complex, soft power approach. He's the father of that technology of using hybrid warfare to destroy existing cultures, break them down through controlled chaos and destabilization. So you have to understand Brzezinski to understand the 20th century. And
I encourage the Chinese to support Pol Pot. Pol Pot was an abomination. We could never support him, but China could. The US winked, semi-publicly, at Chinese anti-aid to the Khmer Rouge.
Zbigniew Brzezinski. Elizabeth Becker, When the War Was Over. 1986. Page 440.
In 1972, I became director of the Trilateral Commission, an American, Japanese, West European public organization. Although in 1988, I was co-chairman with Ben Scowcroft and Henry Kissinger of the Foreign Policy Task Force for Vice President Bush.
You mentioned something earlier that you've done that comes up right in the spot that you're sitting many times by our callers across the country. And that is a suspicion that there is a conspiracy afoot through the Trilateral Commission and the Council on Foreign Relations. You ran the Trilateral Commission for how long?
About 3 years, I think. Something like that, 3 years. Not only did I run it, I helped to found it and organize it with David Rockefeller. So if any of our viewers are conspiracy-minded, here is one of the conspirators.
Let's talk about it for just a moment. How big is it? How many people physically belong to the Trilateral Commission?
When we first started it, and let me repeat again so the viewers will know what we're talking about. It's an American, North American, Western European, Japanese organization to promote closer contacts between these three regions of the world. And the commission is composed of private citizens, not government officials, who are leaders in the different sectors of society. So when we first started, we sought a commission of about 60 people. And initially, when I was first helping to organize it, we had a hard time recruiting those 60 people because it was a brand new idea, which the two of us had thought of, Rockefeller and I. Now we have 360 people with an enormous waiting list.
How do you become a member?
You become a member by invitation issued by the respective executive committees of the commission. The commission has 360 members, a smaller executive committee. The executive committee has its own regional sort of identity. So if you want to be a member of the American one, the North American executive committee has to invite you. I say North American because this is both a Canadian and a U.S. activity.
Is there any reason for the audience to think that this is a bad organization that conspires to, and I want to make sure I represent what they say, is that this group really guides the foreign policy of this country?
Well, you know, I can tell you even better what this group represents, what people think this group represents, people who are conspiratorially minded, because I encounter that all the time when I speak around the country, and the kooks that, you know, pop up with this theory come either from the extreme loony left wing or the loony right wing perspective. If it's the loony right winger, he will stand up and say, you're a conspiracy of people who want to impose one world government and deprive us of our sovereignty.
We cannot leap into world government through one quick step. The precondition for eventual and genuine globalization is progressive regionalization. Because by that, we move toward larger, more stable, more cooperative units.
Zbigniew Brzezinski, speaking at the Mikhail Gorbachev Foundation Inaugural State of the World Forum, San Francisco, September 28, 1995.
If you want to get really angry, go buy this book. It's called The Grand Chessboard: American Primacy and Its Geostrategic Objectives, written by Zbigniew Brzezinski in 1997. I'm going to read you some quotes from that book. Page XII, it's the very first words in the book. The last decades of the 20th century has witnessed a tectonic shift in world affairs. For the first time ever, a non-Eurasian power has emerged not only as a key arbiter of Eurasian power relations, but also as the world's paramount power. The defeat and collapse of the Soviet Union was the final step in the rapid ascendance of a Western Hemisphere power, the United States as the sole and indeed the first truly global superpower. Page XII, it's in the preface. But in the meantime, he says, it is imperative that no Eurasian challenger, Eurasia is everything in between roughly east of Germany all the way to the Pacific Ocean, south through the Indian subcontinent, and includes the Middle East. It's imperative that no Eurasian challenger, by that he means Russia or China, emerges capable of dominating Eurasia and thus of also challenging America. The formulation of a comprehensive and integrated Eurasian geostrategy is therefore the purpose of this book, Geostrategy, Eurasia. The attitude of the American public toward the external projection of American power has been much more ambivalent. The public supported America's engagement in World War II largely because of the shock effect of the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. And he saw one of the most important steps was to prevent Russia from asserting any control in the region, which we did. You know how we did it? Over the last decade, thanks to Goldman Sachs, the Harvard Endowment, the U.S. Treasury and the Federal Reserve, the World Bank, we looted $300 billion out of the Russian economy. $300 billion. I was there. The Russian population was, what, 64 million at the fall of the Soviet Union. The population of Russia is today 145 million. In another 10 years, it will be 130 million. The average life expectancy of a male in Russia has dropped to 48 years. Thanks to the economic devastation, the ruin we visited on their economy, it was a deliberate plan to weaken Russia so that it couldn't challenge our move into Eurasia a decade later. Referring to an area he calls the Eurasian Balkans in a 1997 map in which he circled the exact location. Now remember, this is a book written 4 years ago. And I'm going to show you a map where Zbigniew Brzezinski said the next world conflict was going to take place. Afghanistan, Iran, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan. This is where he said 4 years ago the United States, in order to sustain its precarious, that's my words, economy, would have to control that to maintain its role as the global superpower and to become the world's only superpower. In the long run, global politics are bound to become increasingly uncongenial to the concentration of hegemonic power in the hands of a single state. Hence, America is not only the first as well as the only truly global superpower, but is also likely to be the very last. And what does he say that's going to happen? He says that the United States will fold into a one-world government in which all nations will cease to exist, run by corporations. Hold your breath. Very last pages in the book. Moreover, as America becomes an increasingly multicultural society, it may find it more difficult to fashion a consensus on foreign policy issues except in the circumstance of a truly massive and widely perceived direct external threat.
We have people that think about the conspiracy theories of people like you. You would be a poster child for these people because you have served on the board of the Council on Foreign Relations. You helped start the Trilateral Commission, and you've been to the Bilderberger groups.
Well, yes, I haven't done those for years, so that's partial redemption, I suppose. But otherwise, yes.
But what is belonging to all those groups? We talked about the Trilateral Commission when you were here in 1989. But what about the association with that? Are people too close in this world? People in business too close to the governments?
Well, you know, there is such a thing as insidious influence. And the question is, how does it operate? Does it involve bribery? And does it involve some sort of psychological domination of individuals? I don't believe in this notion of some sort of secret societies controlling people. But of course, in any political system, there are sort of over-the-table and under-the-table arrangements.
Two-part question from Mr. Brzezinski. A, does he think there was any blowback from our funding the Mujahideen in the 70s against the Russians? And B, what was he doing at the Bilderberg Group, and why is there no press allowed inside?
Well, on the second question, I'm not a member of the Bilderberg group, so you better go to someone that is. I'm not a member of the Bilderberg group, so you better go to someone that is. On the first question, the fact is that our help to the Afghans in resisting the Soviets made it possible for us to overthrow the Taliban in Afghanistan with only 300 U.S. military personnel. We didn't have to have more because the Afghans were on our side. They were grateful for what we did in helping them against the Soviets.
He wanted to arm the Mujahideen without revealing America's role. On the Afghan border near the Khyber Pass, he urged the soldiers of God to redouble their efforts.
We know of their deep belief in God, and we are confident that their struggle will succeed. That land over there is yours. You'll go back to it one day because your fight will prevail and you'll have your homes and your mosques back again because your cause is right and God is on your side.
The purpose of coordinating with the Pakistanis will be to make the Soviets bleed for as much, as long as possible.
And the clash of civilizations idea, this idea of smashing the West up against Islam, this is a planned thing that Samuel Huntington, Bernard Lewis, many of the neocons, and Brzezinski, who appears to oppose the neocons at times, but that's only because he wants a more direct approach to fighting nationalism, to ending borders. Brzezinski pioneered this idea of destroying cultures through the end of national borders. Weapons of mass migration, this was an idea that Brzezinski talked about. It's an old military strategy. So Brzezinski is in many ways the successor to Bertrand Russell and H.G. Wells, but we definitely need to understand that Brzezinski is the father of the very things that we're living through, all of this war on terror. This is not chiefly a neocon idea. This actually goes back to Brzezinski. He's the one who trained the Mujahideen. He's the one who gave Carter the idea to use the Mujahideen and create Al-Qaeda back in 1979.
For the first time in all of human history, almost all of mankind is politically awake. And these new and old major powers face still yet another novel reality, in some respects unprecedented. And it is that while the lethality of their power is greater than ever, their capacity to impose control over the politically awakened masses of the world is at a historical low. I once put it rather pungently, and I was flattered that the British Foreign Secretary repeated this, as follows. Namely, in earlier times, it was easier to control 1 million people, literally. It was easier to control 1 million people than physically to kill 1 million people. Today, it is infinitely easier to kill 1 million people than to control 1 million people. It is easier to kill than to control.